Hi, this is Mike Gormley and the Mike Gormley Show as part of the Jeremiah Higgins media empire. And I was thrilled today to have a gentleman named Jessie Colin Young, a name I've been hearing for a long time, but never met him before. And it's very nice to meet you. And as I was saying earlier, and Jeremiah agreed, in researching for our interview, I found out not only a lot about you, but a lot of music I didn't realize was there. And that may be a backhanded compliment. I don't mean it to be negative, but but I discovered a lot of stuff as you've been recording some great stuff over the years.
Yes, thank you. I mean, some of it, it's funny, only the stuff that rises to the surface and gets really popular,
Yeah.
gets exposed the most. And I've been I've been doing it for at least a half a century, and yeah, there's a lot of music there. Um, it's a legacy I'm proud of.
Exposure was never easy to come by. It seems more difficult now, despite the many more outlets. It just seems more difficult than maybe it was when you just got a radio station to play your record.
Yeah, well, and also my daughter Jazzy is making records now. She's a beautiful singer
Mm-hmm.
and songwriter. And it seems, when I was coming along, if you could attract enough attention to get a record deal, this was, you've already passed through the eye of the needle,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. So people were paying attention to you uh, because they
You
because you
got
had a deal. We're actually able. Somebody cared about you enough to take you into a studio and spend some
Yeah.
money and make a record.
Of
Uh,
course, the song everyone knows is a great recording of a song called "Get Together," and and was a huge hit. Uh, it actually got on the charts to a certain level, which means it got a certain amount of airplay, and then disappeared. And then it came back as part of a commercial or uh, I don't know, social thing or something like that. Is that correct?
yeah, it was a brotherhood commercial done by the National Council of Christians and Jews, and I never really heard about that until usually on at 1 o'clock in the morning whenever they put these free things, and I just saw it one night laying there watching late TV, and there it was.
Your song came on.
Yeah, and I not the first time it came on, but that was my first, like, hey, we're on a Brotherhood commercial, and that really, yeah, that carried Get Together into a lot of homes after the '67 release, which was really only a hit on the West Coast and
Uh-huh.
most in San Francisco, which was perfect because we came in to play the Avalon Ballroom. I'd never been to San Francisco for the first time in June 15th, 1967. And we were used to being kind of ignored in New York. And the first thing that happened, I came into this hotel room, put my bag down, turned the radio on, which was built into the headboards of the two twin beds. And I think I was bunking with Corbett at that time. And bam, there's Get Together on the radio. And
Amazing.
nobody at the record company had told us about that. Maybe they didn't know about it. And so and then the Avalon Ballroom was full of people. And, we kind of looked at each other and said, we got to move here. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, you moved there and stayed there for a while.
Yeah.
Um, but stepping back before all that activity,
Mhm.
you had a couple of albums out. You were part of, correct me if I'm wrong, you were part of the Greenwich Village folk movement, or whatever
Yeah.
it's called, and you were up in New England and so on. Um, and you weren't having hits, but you were part of that whole scene, right? You were meeting those people who we've all heard about around that time and everything.
Yes. Yeah, I'd actually, this is a funny story. So my first record comes out. I had to wait for a year because they signed me to Capitol. I made it in 4 hours one evening at A&R Studios, which is still open in New York City. I don't know whether it was 48th or 46th Street, but it was funny. The other day when I was doing an interview, I said, I wonder if it's still there. And says, open 24 hours. The recording, it's still there. Yeah, and Capitol had the Beatles that year. So they just put Jessie on the shelf. And
They had a little, well, they just put you aside at that point.
yeah. And it was good because I was working the basket houses in the village and tough audiences because that was the first place probably in America where they charge you $10 for a cup of coffee. Yeah. I mean, that's not so unusual now, but it was really unusual then. Yeah. And instead of a cover charge, and yeah, so we passed the basket after we played, and I learned a lot. I worked a lot. I practiced all day, and I was doing it with a friend of mine, Caesar Peters. So we were JC and Caesar, and then my record came out. My life changed. It just happened that fast. And my mentor, who made that record with me, Bobby Scott, was a jazz musician early in his career, very marvelous composer. And I've listened to a lot of his records, just amazing. But
you can hear that. You can hear that in your music. I knew you would listen to jazz and folk and blues, and you can hear it. It's all in there. It's tremendous. Even now, I mean, I'm talking about not 50 years ago, but it's still going on. It's still there.
Yeah, it is.
Was that an exciting time, or was it scary because of finances, or how was all, because you were a young guy, so things were a little easier?
Well, we were really lucky. Right after I made the record, when I made the record, I was working at the Rockefeller Foundation as a purchasing agent. I don't know how I ever got this job, but it was keeping me alive. What happened? Good Lord. Oh, we went on a rent strike. And I thought, a rent strike, does that mean we don't have to pay rent? And one of the people in our building, there was a lot of things wrong with the building, and they made a big list, and and she was studying the law, and all of a sudden,
on strike.
There was no rent for 9 months, and that was the 9 months that I needed to get to the release of my record. So, if I could make $10 or $15 in the village at the basket house, I could eat and actually feed my wife, who was with me there, involved and not involved in the music, but we were living together in the village. And so it was not scary.
Right.
It was, everything seemed to be working just right. And when that rent strike was over, my record was out, and my first gig was Club 47 in Cambridge. So that's kind of like
was that the Youngbloods, or was that you?
That's me.
You were still solo at this point.
Yeah.
But now the Youngbloods came together. First off, they were named after an album you already had, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was come together on that album originally?
No, that was still a folk album. Young Blood was the
Mhm.
name of my second album. That was a folk album. Again, kind of mixing my compositions with traditional blues and traditional folk songs. And wonderful John Sebastian played with me on that record. Wonderful harmonica player from the
Mhm.
Oven Spoonful. And then George Duvivier, an amazing jazz bassist who Bobby put on that session, or those several sessions, I guess. And O.C. Johnson played drums. I don't know, but yep. And it was called Youngblood, and originally it was Jessie Colin Young and the Lonely Nights, or the Jerry Corbett Trio, or I forget. We had lots of different names for it, and eventually we just decided on Youngbloods.
Um, you were doing folk, if that's
Mm-hmm.
fair to say. Um, Get Together, first off, it had been already recorded by a bunch of people, right? Kingston Trio and
Mm-hmm.
a Wee Five, I think it was. And um,
I'd never heard any of that.
I never even heard of any of that until I was looking up stuff about you. I had no idea. The real topper is, I think, later on, is that Dave Clark Five did a version of it, which
Really,
you don't know that?
I haven't heard that one. No.
Yeah, it was like top five or something, and it was their last top 10 record was a
Wow.
version of Get Together. So I took a listen because I couldn't connect the two, but they did a pretty good job on
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. I'll have to check it out.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my doctor here in South Carolina who said, you know, the Kingston Trio recorded that song. I said, you're kidding me. He's a big Kingston Trio fan. And he said,
Uh-huh.
wait a minute, let me get my phone. And then he comes back in with playing their version of Get Together. And I said,
Yeah.
wow, it's amazing. I didn't hear it, but I wasn't really, I don't know where I would have heard it, because I was digging into Folkways records and all this music that had been recorded throughout the South, mostly during the Depression. And when they actually paid people like John Lomax and give them a tape recorder and said, go out and record Singing America. And
they did beautifully.
And that music was starting to come out on Folkways.
Uh-huh.
And what a thrill. That's where Statesboro Blues came from, which is on the very first Youngblood album.
I'm trying to, what's the connection? Okay, so it was released and it was folky, but it was a pop tune. It was a pop hit. That's okay with you to say.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it was not intended that we're talking about Get Together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was walking to the village one day on a Sunday, and we were playing at the Cafe a Go-Go. So we were making $20 a man a night, and we would open for whomever was playing there. And
Mhm.
the Blues Project was also doing that. And the reason we were doing it was to get the free rehearsal space, to have a stage with monitors and everything to practice on. For us was really essential because we had, the last time I was in a band was briefly when I was when I was 15 or something, and Corbett the same way. And since his we hadn't been playing in bands, we'd be playing solo or in duos or in folk music. So we had a lot to learn, and I had to switch to the bass because we could not find a bass player, and we had 3 guitar players. So I decided for the adventure. Of course, McCartney was a great inspiration. And I said, well, he's doing it. It can be done. You can be a lead singer and
Sure.
play bass.
I don't mean to stick to come together because there's so many other things to talk about, but it is interesting to me that wondering how you made that transfer in sound in recording from more folky things to, did somebody say you got to do it this way, or you guys just heard it that way, or how did that arrangement, if you will, come together?
Well, I think I don't know. We just coalesced on that. I fell in love with that song. I heard it by mistake. I went down into the go-go that Sunday and thinking that I would find that it was dark and I could call the guys and we could rehearse. Mm-hmm. And instead there was an open mic, and I would have normally not gone into the open mic, but for some reason it was 2 flights down the stairs to the go-go. And for some reason I went down the 2nd flight of stairs and I walked through that beaded curtain, and there was Buzzy Lenhart singing Get Together. And I was riveted. And I ran up to him after he came off and said, "Oh man, I got to have the lyrics. Hi, I'm Jessie Youngbloods." And we hadn't met. I'd seen him play with Tim Hardin, but I had never heard him sing. And so he wrote the lyrics out for me, and I took it into rehearsal the next day. I still love that song. It's and when I heard it, I really, those funny things that happen with clouds in the movies about the Bible, and clouds open up, and that. I mean, I had that kind of feeling that my life was now changed kind of radically. Mm-hmm. And it became very much my path. Yeah.
Well, it's been a while. So you're now, what's going on now is a 50th anniversary of Song for Julie. Mm-hmm. And you've re-released the record, or you got somebody to re-release the record, or how is all of that?
When I signed with Warner Brothers, my manager, Stuart Cutchins, was able to. We'd spent years getting somebody to re-release Soul of a City Boy, my first album. And he said, "You artists shouldn't have to do that. You sell, most of the records you sell, happen in the first few years after you've released them. Mm-hmm. So the masters should come back to you." So that was the deal I signed with Warner Brothers. So Song for Julie belongs to me, and we just put it out again.
That's great.
We remastered it.
Mm-hmm. Are you touring with it? Are you out playing?
Well, I'm going to do some promotion, but no, I was out playing last year. I had a wonderful tour with my daughter. I kind of went back to playing solo during COVID. Mm-hmm. Did a lot of Facebook recordings of all my songs solo.
Yeah.
And my manager said, "Why don't you should make a solo album." So I did. Called Highway Troubadour, came out on BMG. And then Jessie Young, my daughter, she and I toured last summer. And in the middle of the tour, we got COVID.
Oh, man.
So it got, some of the shows got put off. And I think I'm still not quite as strong as I was physically before COVID. Yeah. So I decided that I would spend this year mostly writing my autobiography, which I had started before COVID and kind of lost interest in. And now I am really excited by the project. And we have of releasing and of writing, I'm of writing the story of my life, kind of digging back into it and writing about it is
it enjoyable?
it's really enjoyable.
Oh, is it? Good.
It's that's something I didn't expect. People said, "Oh, you should write a book." And I said, "Oh man, it's too much work."
It is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but this is a perfect time for it. I need a little pause from the road, but I need to do something, and writing the book is right there. We'll go out and do a few promotional shows, short shows on the West Coast in October, and that's about it.
Oh, good.
I mean, that's I think about all I've.
We're gonna hear "Song for Julie" in a minute on our way to a commercial. Is there a quick synopsis of the song, where it came from and what it's about?
Quick, yeah. Well, it was called Melody in B flat, and we didn't know exactly what to do with it. I had just the Song for Julie band came together. That was the first album we ever made. So this was really an exciting time. We were learning. I was learning how to be an engineer. I kept buying new equipment when I could afford it. I had built a studio next to my house. I said, why do I have to go to LA and stay in a cheap motel? Why, when I have this, why don't I build a studio next to my house? And
you're way ahead of time on that. I mean, everybody's got one now, but you were a pioneer.
I was a pioneer. It is true. And boy, was that. So yeah, the impetus and the energy on that record all come from these four guys meeting each other and learning to play together and recording kind of all at the same time, including the guy who was also singing but engineering. And we had to work that out,
So it's now on Spotify and all those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and Song for Julie. My ex-wife was there one day in the rehearsal, and we were rehearsing it, and at the end of that day, she just handed me these lyrics, and we had wondered, like, how do we get out of this? We don't have an ending or a place for it to go, and it doesn't feel complete. So those lyrics, which she wrote, I may have edited them some, but yeah, that made the song complete.
All right, well, we're going to jump into a commercial now and hear "Song for Julie" on our way into that commercial. So we'll be back in a short while.